All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Nutley Cisco Academy podcast. My name is Dominic. We're going to be talking about net neutrality today. It's going to be more of a little bit of a debate going on, so let's get into it.
My name is James. I'm going to be for net neutrality, while Lyle is going to be against it.
I'm Lyle.
I'm Anthony. I'll be for net neutrality with James.
And I'm also for net neutrality as well.
All right.
So let's start off with why a reason as you're against it.
All right. So I feel the government should not be interfering with private companies and what they wish to do with their internet.
But the government is the one that put it in the law, did it not?
What are you
It's government interfere. The government was the one that allowed net neutrality to be dismantled.
Right. Well, the government created net neutrality in 2015.
To make it so that people's private rights and they have the option to choose different ISPs based on what they would want.
I feel like that's a really crucial point right there, man.
Yeah.
We should be able to do what we want with the internet.
Right, but so should the companies that laid the cables.
So should the companies that also don't want to monopolize. Having no net neutrality by indirect communications essentially stops all competition from lower ISPs trying to get ground. There's three main ones that we know: AT&T, Sprint, and Verizon. Biggest out there ISP providers. Yet it's only been them three for decades now, and it's because they've been forcefully shutting down smaller ISPs by making their prices so low that nothing can beat them. The net neutrality laws allowed these smaller companies to rise up and help their hometowns start small and dream bigger. But now with net neutrality being dismantled, it's so much more difficult for smaller companies to start. And in kind of an indirect way, are you saying that the monopolization of ISPs is essential to creating the private companies without government benefactors?
Well, I'm not really saying that monopolization is essential, but I'm just saying the government shouldn't be interfering in any way, and they should just let the economy play out the way it is.
I agree with that a little bit to a certain extent. Like, again, I'm not for it, but I can see where you're coming from. Like, you don't want government always taking control over the people's part. Like, this is more of our issue. You know what I'm saying? Like, we always talk about government intervention, and us as a people, this is our own case. So we should be able to handle it as our own. We shouldn't be getting the government involved in situations like this.
Well, I do understand the fact of not wanting the government to interfere, but with it in place, all they did, the government-wise, was say, you can't block certain things. You can't make it pay for faster internet.
You can't charge your own rates, and you can't charge people who use up over 55% of the bandwidth. That's Netflix and Google, and you can't charge them more than just regular people.
Yeah, and that's what it was generally put in place for.
Yeah, I feel like that's just unfair.
Right, exactly. They're slowing down your internet by just using it.
So I kind of lost what you're coming from. You're while saying that, or you're saying you're for the net neutrality for that purpose?
No, I'm against it because with net neutrality, you can't give them their own separate channels to go through. It's got to be the same internet for everyone. And
yeah, which it should be. We should all be getting the same.
Wouldn't it make sense that if you gave, the people pushing the most through the wires, wouldn't it make sense to get them out of the public area? If you know what I mean.
I see where you're coming from, but does that justify arduous prices that they could pay whatever, they can charge whatever they like?
Literally.
And what are you going to do? Say no? You need that internet for good reasons sometimes.
Well, then, if they're charging whatever they like, that's where the small companies will come in. Because, like you said, they were kind of pushing the small companies out by charging super low rates and making it, impossible for, well, not impossible, but just not
difficult.
very, yes. So.
And And while that could come into play, you also have to think small companies don't have nearly the potential that these bigger companies have.
They don't.
If you were saying, oh, I want cheaper internet, but I also want faster internet, you couldn't go to a small ISP.
Yeah,
They're too small. Right.
Well, that's where you've got to make a choice.
Pay an absolute inadequate price. Again, it won't start off that way. Everything in this kind of sense will be slow because companies are going to be scared to make the first move. But eventually, they'll make it. And they'll make it, and they'll make more, and then they'll make more. And now you have $100 months fast internet, right? Which is ridiculous. Now it's $20 a month for phone, cable, internet, right? Mm-hmm. And that's fair because most people don't use all that. The most internet intensive thing people use is probably Netflix.
Yeah, and Google. Like I said, Netflix and Google made up over 50% of the 50% of the usage.
Well, also because Google and Netflix are such big companies.
Exactly. So why not give them their own channels to go through?
Because it makes sense in a way.
What do you mean? Like
give them their own wires to go through.
But that's how much
are they acting as their own like ISP?
Going through the ISPs, they get their own different speeds, which are much faster, so that they could push all their data through.
But then you got to think of how are they going to get the money to lay the kit? Are they going to lay like new telephone lines? Basically, are they going to make fiber optic cables go through the ground? At some point, you got to wonder like how much money is that going to cost, and are people really going to want to? Like, sure, Verizon goes, hey, that sounds good, but how much money would it cost?
And then that gets thrown back onto the people.
It's like Google Fiber, right? The recent ISP that Google's in charge of. And it's in 3 cities right now because of how expensive it is. But it is really well made. It's nearly gigabyte speeds for the same price as now, but it's so expensive to lay. And it would be the same thing with higher price.
But Google is laying it, aren't they?
If you put it in that terms, the next city that they plan to lay it down in is in 3 years.
Well, it's slow.
Going somewhere. It's slow,
but it's
sure,
happening.
It's coming along. But towns like ours, like Nutley, we'd get nothing. We're not going to get it.
We're not going to get it now, but in the future, maybe 10, 15 years in the future, although I'm sure there will be much faster speeds than a gigabyte, but it can come, and it will come.
And so I think rounding it out like that, a good way to summarize is, should people be willing to wait however long they have to for overall faster internet for things that they want, right? But it's also come down to, are people willing to give away the privacy, right? The accessibility of being able to see whatever they want.
I just feel like that just goes against like our rights as a whole. Why would you want to do that?
Well, I don't think the people should be directly telling the government to tell the ISPs what to do. It's the people aren't the ones who lay the wires. It's the ISPs. So it just makes sense for them to be the ones, it makes sense for the ISPs to be controlling what goes through their wires. It's not the government that put down the wires.
But it also comes down to a couple years ago. I know that the internet, like the actual just physical internet, was defined as a human right. Every human has the born right.
Yeah, I don't think companies like that should be taking advantage of like what they can do for people. You know what I'm saying? They can't take advantage like, oh yeah, we can do this, you guys can't, so we're gonna up the price of that. Like, I just think that's just unfair.
With it being now considered a human right, it's no longer a product; it's a means, right? Everyone should have access to it. Sure, some people don't, but those are circumstantial, right? You can always have access to the internet with a phone, right? Some people don't have a phone, though. You'll always have access to the internet.
Yeah, you can always stop by a library or something.
It's no longer about delivering a product. It's about making it available to everyone. Which without net neutrality kind of stop. It hinders, right?
So-
Because people will be focused on what they have and what they'll want to make more of. Because in the end, these are companies. They're
Right.
here for profit. There's no meaning in running a company for anything other than profit.
But why should you let the government interfere with what the company is doing? I get that it's a
because
human
you're taking
right.
advantage.
Well,
It's not right.
Then
You're going against the right.
Of the government.
Like
All right, so
All right.
going off of what you're saying, it's a human right to have the internet. And now, who said that?
That's a good question.
All right. Again, the latest. All right.
All right. Well, I think the bottom line,
Right.
your stance is still the same. I can
Yes.
understand the points that you're getting at. I kind of see it, but then again, like me personally, like we were talking about before, it is a human right. I don't think that big companies like that should be taking advantage of the people. Like you're already paying a substantial amount of money for their plans to begin with, and the fact that they keep trying to milk you for more is just not right, in my opinion, personally. But again, you're also right in the sense like it's their company. If you don't want to pay for their stuff, you don't necessarily have to.
No, and I think that's a great point to actually end off on. While no one changed opinions, it's great to lay out what's in front of us on the table
Yes.
for other people to realize. Some things maybe people didn't realize are important because eventually it's going to come down to what people want.
Yeah.
Right. While the companies are generally in charge and the government in charge of them, it all kind of comes down to being what you're willing to give up or what you're willing to kind of keep, per se. Are you willing to give more money for faster internet and more resourceful internet, or are you willing to keep your rights but not have nearly what you could?
I do disagree with you, but I see where you're coming from.
And I think that's a good place to stop. So,
Okay.
All right, so this has been our Cisco podcast. If you want, you can subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. Peace.